this moment, let us, shall we say, take some general framework to open this discussion. First of all, everybody has a personal reality. What they see around them, what you can bring into your state of focus, and that will come, or rather bear fruit, whether it is exact or whether it is disturbed, depends so much on the person themselves. Then there is the shared reality in which friends create their own little, shall we say, domain, in which shared impressions take form and things begin to manifest in alignment with all the impressions. And then there is the general framework where all of the impressions are brought to bear in what you might call world events. World events are, shall we say, localized and spread across the planet as a whole. So many impressions are forming the reality all of the time. The many impressions are pushing upon one another until they take the shape and the form that is part of the influence that gains acceptability. So that is enough to begin a conversation. Whatever questions arise will, of course, determine what the reality begins to take shape.
Well, a question that I feel in my heart is in regards of so many realities taking part in the whole world, and so many news and opinions that I just feel like the world is so imbalanced in a way because they don't know who to listen to or where to go. And my question is, where is humanity going to go from this point on?
You understand this. Individuals can take part in it or not. It appears as if you are drawn into the greater perception, but in reality, everyone's input affects everything else. So it appears as if you are, shall we say, on the bus with another driver, but in reality, you have already bought the ticket, if you understand what I mean. So there are many bus trips. You could go anywhere that you choose, and when you buy the bus ticket, you are on the bus with all the other people wanting to go to that location, to that destination. Do you understand? So it appears as if there is one answer, but everyone is on their own bus trip, if you like. When you're sitting on the bus, it is going through the various environments. Sometimes it is amongst the trees, and sometimes there is the desert or the tundra or whatever else, and some things attract one person's interest while the next person is reading their phone. You understand? So one thing is important and another for that person is not. So you begin to frame your own reality out of the inputs that you have. And the result is the combination of what you put your energy into. Do you follow what I mean? So it appears as if it is all one big disaster, but it is not at all. There is, of course, news. Shall we say, the news of the disaster is in that environment, not in your environment. Do you follow what I mean? So you look on it as if it has happened in your world, but in reality, it is only reported in your world. Do you follow what I mean? So you are part of it, but not part of it at all.
How do you separate it from integrating into your life?
Of course, how one integrates into your own life, how much energy and how much focus, how much interest you have determines what you attract, who you attract, and so on. So it appears as if it is affecting you, but in reality, the only effect it has is that which you apply. So if you are, shall we say, worried about what is going on and it generates fear, then you will respond to the fear and indeed draw that which is fearful into your experience. That will prove, of course, that the experience was real in the first place, even though it wasn't. Do you follow what I mean? So whatever you put into place in the present affects both the future and the past. Because time flows both directions from the place of power. The only moment you can make a choice is right now. You understand, not only, but this is, there are patterns within patterns within patterns of influence. Each of these fields of influence are interpenetrating everything else, from the cosmic to the subatomic. All of them are in a wide play, whether it is behavioral. In other words, an individual's disturbances can personally disturb many fields around them. But if one is clear in one's personal intentions, shall we say, if one is above something, if one's vibration, if you like, one's waveform, one's frequency is very high, then it will not affect, rather will not be affected by, shall we say, lower frequencies. The higher frequency will impose itself onto the lower. You understand, that is why it is always been said that love will overcome fear, because it will, shall we say, influence the waveform that the fear takes on.
I got a question about fear. Has fear always been part of us, or was it something that was created by something else?
Fear is a reaction. You understand, this is when some vibratory form, something occurs which one assigns importance towards. Then you take it on as an important revelation. Shall we say that in the beginning, fears start from childhood. A child needs protection from the external world while it builds itself the ability to form and keep its world in shape. But if it is disturbed, if there is some, shall we say, breaking in of that form, then the form that the child takes forward remains disturbed. Do you follow? Then when events occur as, shall we say, adults, it shakes up the pathway and the pattern that was formed earlier on. And in such a case, one responds or reacts to it with fear or with anger. If one can perceive that in the time frame of the present, the past is negligible, then one can rise above the fear and send, shall we say, compassion back into the past. When one sends compassion into the past, one, shall we say, sends it to the event, and it affects the victim and the victimizers. Do you understand? Everyone is released from that moment in time because it has been decommissioned. Does this make sense?
Yes. I got a question in regards of, I heard about an event that will take place in this time life maybe, that will wake up the world and humanity to become to what we need to become. How close to that event are we?
Shall we say events for waking up are stacked upon one another? If you would like to say, there are cycles and cycles and cycles, different time patterns, if you like. Shall we say there is one, shall we say yes, 20 years, and then there is 50 years, and then there is 120 years, and so on. Now, if all of these events were to stack up and arrive at one location in the time event cycle, then it would be a widespread moment for many people to, shall we say, perceive a new approach, a new way. They would all arrive at the place of beginning. Do you understand? And if we are to take this event, you could say there are moments and moments and moments, but shall we say it is in your own time frame relatively close. Shall we say there are a series of events, one following the other, and each one adding up. You understand? So there is, shall we say, a major shift in consciousness, that is the completion of the shift in consciousness, shall we say around about the time of 2050. You understand? That would seem a long way off, but it is the events in between that are pertinent, that each one offers a different clarity. That is a moment for clarity that wakes a certain group, a moment for clarity that begins to wake another group up, a moment of clarity that starts to bind humanity across the planet as such. And finally, a moment where it is an agreement that consciousness has awoken. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah.
So we have spoken there is a new species that came into being, and that new species will have become, shall we say, the defining force in that time frame. So, shall we say, the completion of the old takes time, but every moment of time, the new impulse, the new shift is becoming more and more certain. As one begins to understand even more the nature of the cosmic forces that operate in this domain, shall we say, in the domain of creativity. That is the imaginal world as it is. You understand? So that if you look at your history, you will see that as time unfolded, different ideas were imagined into the future. And as the future unfolded, those imaginal ideas became more certain and eventually collapsed or condensed into physical reality. And once again, you are on the edge of a new breakthrough in such understandings. You understand? Shall we say that the atomic world began its theoretical advance in 1900, came to its fruition in 1930. And from 1930 onwards, it has been becoming more and more clarified until you stand on the very edge of a deeper understanding of how energy systems or fields of interaction operate.
Will this age of enlightenment, this unification of our species, will it come in time to address the ecological devastation that our planet is experiencing? Will we have time to stop it or to change our pathways so that we can regenerate the earth?
First of all, one has to consider that is the direction that humanity is taking. However, it ceases or does not take into consideration that humankind are unimportant in the scheme of things. What I call the planetary guardian will not allow that to occur. So humankind finds itself constantly in battle with the results of its own behavior. You are seeing this immediately. You have been seeing this for many centuries. You think that in some way you can somehow permanently destroy it. Whereas the planetary guardian, with the greatest degree of compassion, has, shall we say, held back from wiping you completely off the face. You understand? It is not really an important question. Do you follow? Because if you continue, then you will go. The planet will rejuvenate, of course, but without, shall we say, its vermin. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah.
So it is not about protecting the planet. It is about protecting the species. It is about waking up and recognizing that you have destroyed the very important parts of your existence. And what is called spirituality is really waking up to that inner sense of belonging as part of, shall we say, a whole environment, which, shall we say, is really described as the Garden of the Eden. You understand, before the fall of humanity, before the nonsense that humans thought they were something better than everything else, that they were more important. And that still goes on. Individuals wanting to be more important. Even in the, what is called the spiritual community, it is how important do I have to be? I have to be important. I have to be taken notice of, because this is myself. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if one truly sees the other, then you are always taken in by the wholeness of such a beautiful being, trying its hardest to become its best, even if you call them the worst. Always trying to be better, always trying to be accepted as being of value. Do you understand? So important. How big you have to be does not mean that you think you are of value. Someone who essentially understands their own value will do so because they value everything else. So they value the animals and the diversity. They value the air that we all breathe. Do you understand? They value the cleanliness of their environment all around them. It is such a way that it is said, cleanliness is next to godliness. You understand? If you are clean, that is in your thoughts, your actions, your deeds, your sense of self. If you are clean, that is how to find God. But if you are hiding something that is, shall we say, dirty, or it is not able to be spoken, then you are hiding from yourself. Do you understand? And others will easily see that you are hiding something, that you are cannot really be trusted. You follow what I mean?
As the world is becoming in a split of two different worlds, the old and the new, are these two worlds literally going to split, or is it just a metaphor to new and
Shall we say this? If you put your attention on one side, it will become more and more real to you. If you put your attention on the other side, it will become more and more aligned with you. When the two no longer meet, where are they? You understand? They cannot be in the same location. The physical world comes from the interference patterns of one's thoughts, feelings, and one's actions. Do you follow what I mean? The physical world as a singularity does not exist even in the present time. So, shall we say there are those that wish in a certain direction. The results of the actions of those people will eventually manifest. They will get what they want. Some futures do not have a long existence. You follow? Because they are destructive and eventually self-destructive. And the other is progressive, or it is working towards improving and coming into balance and harmony. When something arises in balance and harmony, it has a long future. You understand what I mean? It is not that there is a judgment. The judgment day has come, and these are going to burn, and those ones are going to fly somewhere. You understand? It is the results of the attitudes, beliefs, and actions that determine one's future. Do you understand? And if you hold on to that, you will have a long future. You can live, shall we say, quite well, at least to 150 years old. It is not that one has to somehow deteriorate. One deteriorates because one's actions, behaviors, and so on. So if you look after your body will look after yourself. Your body will provide a housing, a temple, for you to reside in. And so it is with the other. If you do not look after it, if you abuse the body, if you abuse others' bodies, even as much, then the long-term effects will play out in your world. And that can create some deep divisions and some extraordinarily painful experiences. May not look that way initially on the surface. You understand? In the present time you have been, shall we say, in your country there, you have been divided by one person. Now, it appears as if that person has certain misgivings or certain problems. The results, of course, must play out in the lifespan. They must be completed in the lifespan of termination. So if you abuse and hurt others, then that will essentially and eventually turn up on one's own doorstep. One should hold compassion then for those who are ignorant. There are those that somehow believe if you talk to gods that they will save you, even if you are misbehaving, even if you are taking actions that are destructive and so on. But of course, actions have to find their return. In the old times, shall we say, centuries ago, it took a long period of lifetimes for those events to return. But as you move towards the final shift in consciousness, events and their return operate almost instantly. that is what is called karma, turns up on one's doorstep. You take an action and almost immediately the reaction occurs. That is the final marker that the shift in consciousness is occurring, because after the shift there is no time. There is no past and there is no future. You are only in the present. Every action is in the present, because tomorrow you know nothing about. The predictions for tomorrow are meaningless. So one could think, what can I do tomorrow that will stop, shall we say, the climate problem? Not going to happen. What can I do right now in this moment with this piece of plastic? Do I put it in the landfill? What do I do with it? Do I buy it in the first place? Do I eliminate all the packaging? Do you understand? What do I do in the present moment is all that matters, because that is what is the return on investment.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the new species, the children that started to arriving in about 2012, I think you said? Could you tell us more about them?
Shall we say they are taking shape as you find there are more and more of these children that seemingly are out of phase with normal expectations. Some of these children are born with, shall we call them, genius minds. They can do anything. So you are seeing these children turn up in the universities. They are 10 years old and they are finishing PhD studies. What you are doing? How can that possibly be? What will happen? These children are taking over because they have an ability that has not been recognized. They are not, shall we say, wired in the same configuration. That is neurologically in the same configuration as the old species were. Some old species have had upgrades, but it is not the same as a different hardware. You understand? So these children not only can read the fields, but they can tap into the information fields of higher education. So when it comes, shall we say, to mathematics, they do not have to go through the operation. They simply tune in to the answer. You understand? Why bother with all the workings out? It's all too time consuming. So you understand they are in touch in that higher field. Not only are they in touch with that, but they are in touch with all the other children who are in touch with the same node. You understand? So if you have an interest, shall we say, in music, then you have connections all over the planet with other children who have touched the same node, have stroked the same node, and all of them tap into the same abilities. They are sharing abilities. And thus they are geniuses. You understand? The framework of that is difficult to perceive as, shall we say, the New World Order appears. Do you follow? They have information on everything and everyone. Not through technology. Technology came about as, shall we say, the imaginal field in which to organize the shifting consciousness that manifests as the new species. You understand? So shall we say, when you invent a new, shall we call them online gaming, the skill base is set in operation in the intellectual fields that created it in the first place. In other words, the metrics on which these gaming platforms operate are mathematical forms that higher intelligence, new species, taps into. And because everything is in a repetitive pattern of interference, they can read the matrix as if it is, shall we say, a book in front of them, a code in front of them. Most of them do not know the fundamental organization of that. They are simply using it.
I got a question in regards of the children. Is there a war against them? And if so, how can we protect them?
Of course there's a war against them, but you do not need to protect them because they cannot lose it. Individuals are no longer important. You understand, individual species in a way are not important when there is a wholeness. Their consciousness separates into individuals for a time frame. Short or long, it doesn't matter. You understand? So even if there is a war against them, they are far more able to deal with this than ever before. The idea is that you can somehow make an army of, a robotic army that will separate them out is also quite nonsensical, because they already have the consciousness to interfere with the very programs. Do you understand? It is beyond anyone else's ability. The question is, can they really be, shall we say, deformed, distorted? You understand? Can you make an evil one? And the answer to that is not really, because in the end there is a unity and a sense of belonging that cannot be superseded.
I do have a question. There is, as you know, a lot of misinformation and theory going around the social media, much like the virus. Why do some people hold on to the idea that other people are going to be microchipped and someone else is going to control the world? Where does that come from?
Fears always manifest. You understand? And so it is. You understand what happened is someone got the idea and you microchipped all the animals. And seeing as humans are just animals, then one would just microchip them. But of course it is nonsense, because you already are chipped. You are already in the system. You cannot walk down the street without your face being recognized, and your movements are mm, collected, so on and so on. But it doesn't serve, because in the end, having all the information doesn't stop human consciousness. You understand? So one likes to live in fear, one likes to promote fear because there is importance. If I can start a new fear, a new viral situation, then I will become important. I will become illustrious and so forth. But in the end, all of it will finally find its own sense. Of course, there are people doing not so good things. As I pointed out, there is always a consequence for that, and so on. But shall we say, if one holds to the higher forces, one lifts one's vibration, and one helps, shall we say, build a unity, then you will find strength comes in numbers. And when strength comes in numbers, have you noticed how much fear that generates in the others? In those that are outside of that, they are fearful of it. Now they have to escalate, they have to send in the troops, as it were, to try to break the force. But how can you do that when it is beyond that? And that is happening all over the planet, and it is happening because, shall we say, the early species, the leaders of the new species came in order to accumulate the energetic forms, to build, shall we say, a base for change. It is energetic. And you cannot, shall we say, deal with energy with physicality. Physicality is the lowest form. You understand, the lowest form is to go in with the guns and the army and so on. The second highest form is to influence by fear and stirring up the emotions. The next form is to spread misinformation. But it cannot, still cannot displace the higher thought forms. When people are in compassion and in looking for harmony, then what occurs is a general building of friendship.
I think we're almost out of time. Do you have anything you'd like to close with?
We have covered such a lot, and also it is always complex as one begins to perceive it, but as it clarifies, it becomes much more easy to understand. It is not at all complex in reality. Enough for this evening. So once again, thank you for your time. Because whatever you take from our discussions and apply, talk about it amongst yourself and refine it in your own system. You are working for the upliftment of consciousness. That is all of the job. Thank you and good evening.